There you go.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Scott.
Thank you.
Right here, I can't get some. Stuck here. We're gonna hit. That link in. Do something, set your password. Okay. And make it this, so just log off. I can give you the thumbs up. I'll change it after. So we water gate.
We good? Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your patience, and thank you to Scott for handling our technical issues as always. The public hearing this evening is one of two such hearings mandated by our Newington Charter to give any elector or taxpayer the opportunity to be heard regarding the upcoming budget for the upcoming fiscal year. The public hearing is a summary of the town manager's proposed budget showing anticipated revenues by major sources, proposed expenditures, and the amount proposed to be raised by taxes. These three conditions will be met as we proceed through this presentation and the public hearing. Next, please, Scott. Let's start by taking a moment to discuss how the annual budget process works. Many of you here are seasoned pros, so please bear with me. But if there are folks here who are watching online who have not observed or participated in a budget process before, it's helpful to know how this all comes together. The town's budget process is prepared, considered, and adopted per the town charter, sections 802 through 806, which requires a timeline for the town manager to submit their budget for consideration by the town council, 2 public hearings, and the timing and process for which the town council makes changes to the proposed budget, adopts it, and sets a mill rate. So this process actually started back in January when town departments submitted their budget requests to myself, the town manager, and also the CIP budget requests. Myself and the director of finance and the deputy director of finance review the requests with each department, sometimes numerous times, and we make necessary adjustments to the departmental requests and the CIP requests as we see necessary. Those become part of the proposed budget that you have in front of you this evening. Concurrently, the Board of Education considers the Superintendent of School, Dr. Brumit's request. On February 29th, 2024, the Board of Ed finalized and submitted the budget request to me. And the next slide, please, Scott. And on March 1st, we submitted my proposed budget to the town council, which contains the proposed revenues and expenditures for the town and board and the calculation of the proposed mill rate. After that is the first public hearing, which is where right at this moment. It is on the town manager's proposed budget. But there's actually still a lot of work to do before the final budget is adopted. Over the next 2 weeks, the town council will meet several times to consider each department's budget, as well as the proposed capital improvement plan budget, line by line. As part of that process, Dr. Brummett, the superintendent of schools, will present the Board of Ed's budget to the town council on March 26th. Scrolling here. Also on March 26th, the town council has the opportunity to vote on any proposed changes that they'd like to make to the budget, whether it's operating or CIP for the town, and can vote on any changes to the Board of Education's total operating budget. These changes become the town council's tentative budget. Next after that, there's a second public hearing on Tuesday, April 2nd for electors and taxpayers to comment on the town council's tentative budget. That's the next draft of the budget. Following that public hearing, the council has an opportunity to make some additional adjustments if you wish. And then the final step of the process occurs on April 16th when the town council adopts the final budget and sets the mill rate. Next slide, please, Scott. Here on the screen is the full budget meeting schedule with details on when each town department and the Board of Ed will be discussed in more detail. We have some copies of the schedule available here on the table and also on the town's website. I wanted to put that up here because there's going to be a location change for the March 26th meeting. And I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. Due to the presidential preference primary elections taking place in town that day, they'll actually take place in this room. So we will let everybody know what the location of that meeting is ASAP. We'll post it on the website, email everybody out, put it on social media, make sure that everybody knows where we're meeting that day. Each meeting, in addition to being held in person, they do have a hybrid Zoom option. So if you can't come in person, you're welcome to join us online. Following this public hearing tonight, the town council has a regular meeting at 7 p.m. or at the conclusion of this public hearing, and they're going to start reviewing some of the individual department budgets. So tonight, the budgets that will be reviewed by the council will be the general government, public safety, public works, and community development budgets. It's important to note that although we do have 2 public hearings, there are opportunities for the public to speak at any of these upcoming budget meetings during public participation. Next slide, please, Scott. When creating the town's operating budget, we project our fuel, motor fuel, and utility costs along with projected changes to full-time contractual and non-contractual salaries and increases. You will see some 0% increases to some of the utilities, which are assumed due to anticipated consumption and projected market rates. So these are the things we use to calculate our budget. Next slide, please. So where are we and how did we get there? My proposed budget indicates a 3.9% increase in the mill rate. But there is some work to get to this point. What you see in front of you is a very simplified summary of the initial departmental budget requests versus this proposed budget. In this summary, all of the factors not listed, such as the grand lists, the non-tax revenues, debt service, actually remain the same for both departmental requests and my proposed budget. So I only put the changes in this particular table to make it more simple to read. What you will see here is the result of the items that did change. Those are the operating and CIP budgets, which all saw reductions across the board. While my proposed budget presented tonight is far from the final budget, it does reflect some suggested reductions necessary to bring the mill rate down from what would have been a 9.7% increase based on the departmental budget request down to 3.9% for the council to consider and make additional changes to. These were not easy reductions to make, particularly on the Board of Ed side. On the town side, various department heads were asked to take a look at ways to find efficiencies in their budget and identify high and low priority items. On the CIP side, we looked at project fund balances, expected workload for the upcoming year, and project priorities to reduce the request. I want to express my gratitude to the staff who were extremely cooperative and helpful in identifying, prioritizing, and making these changes. If you look at the town operations side, the departmental request for town operations, that's each department and what they use to run for their day-to-day basis, was reduced from 5.77% increase to a 3.85% increase. The Board of Ed operations, their requested departmental request from the Board of Ed was 7.5%, and that was reduced to 4.0% increase. The capital improvement town Board of Ed, the capital improvements for the town and the Board of Ed, this is a big one, which we'll explain in a minute. The initial departmental request increase was 57.12%, and it was decreased through the methods I just described down to 27.10%. A portion of the town's fund balance is typically applied to help balance the budget. Last year, the town council's adopted budget applied about $3.685 million of the fund balance towards the budget. I initially recommended a bit lower use of that fund balance for the upcoming fiscal year of 2.6 million, and then I amended it a little bit to 2.825 million, which is still a reduction, about a 23% reduction from last year. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, just give me a second. Now I'm stuck. Let's delve more into the budget. We'll start with the appropriations, which are the budget expenditures. Next slide, please. The town manager's proposed budget appropriations for the fiscal year total is $142,995,627. This is an increase of about $5.4 million, or about 4%. As with any budget, you have to balance expenses with income, but we'll start with the expense side. The first piece of the budget we'll talk about, if you can click Scott, please, I'm sorry, are the appropriations, which are comprised of the following components. Town government operations, which is the budget allocated to each of the various town departments, is $42.4 million, an increase of about $1.57 million, or 3.85%. Click, please. Next, there's the Board of Education operations with appropriations totaling $85.49 million, an increase of about $3.29 million, or 4%. Click. The MDC sewer assessment is $4.86 million, which is actually a very slight decrease of about $7,000, or 0.2%. Click. The debt service, which is made up of principal and interest payments for various town projects, is a total of $2.52 million. This is actually a decrease from last year of about $876, or 34.7%. The CIP, the capital improvement request, is about $7.66 million, an increase of $1.63 million, or 27%. And finally, it's a smaller item, but the contribution to the employee leave liability reserve is $49,600, a decrease of about $5,300, or just over 10%. Let's take a look at the operating budgets and CIP requests for the town and Board of Ed. Next slide, please. Limiting the increase in the general government operations to 3.85% was a challenge. The council will review each of these departments' budgets in depth over the next 2 weeks, so there'll be plenty of detail to follow. But here are some of the key points and major challenges we faced in putting together this budget. There are no new major initiatives added to this budget. Next. The actual negotiated increases for the police union employees are included in the department's budget for 2.25%. However, the AFSCME contract has some pending negotiations for the fiscal year, so wage increases are unknown at this time. As noted in the budget assumptions, we anticipate an increase in AFSCME and non-union salaries. Another item is inflation for parts and materials, and market conditions. Inflation for parts and materials affected departments across the board. For example, the CROG bid for road salt to be used during snowstorms will increase by about $11,700, or about 5.2%. That's just one example. Along the same vein, contractual services, next please, Scott, increase across the board. For example, the offsite cloud backup service contract for IT increased by about $5,800, which is 20%. And these are also indicative of costs across the board for all departments. Next, please. Personnel changes included restoring an unfunded position, much needed unfunded position in the engineering department, and partial year funding for additional deputy director of finance funding for an anticipating retirement, among others. Employee benefits increased about $944,000 due to medical claim history and an increase in retirements. And of course, we need to continue to provide services to the town residents with limited resources. Next slide, please. Here's just, there we go, thank you. Here's just a sample of some items reduced in the town's operating budget. These line items will be discussed in detail at each of the departmental budget meetings. A couple of things that were reduced were the elimination of a parks foreman position through attrition, elimination of proposed reinstated librarian 1 position, which had been eliminated in a previous budget. As mentioned earlier, reduction in parts and supplies for the highway, parks, and facilities departments, reduction of materials such as grass seed and herbicide in the parks department, reduction in conferences and training, elimination of newly proposed hose washing equipment and newly proposed hose testing equipment for the fire department. Next, please. To hone in on the town's department operating budget for a moment, here's a history of the past several years of the town manager's operating budget request and what the council adopted. So this year, on the town side only, for operating only, the town manager proposed budget is 3.85%. Last year, the town manager's proposed was 4.25, and the council adopted 4.01, and so on and so forth. And that's just, again, for the town operating side. There's quite a bit more to the budget than that. Next, please. Now we talk for a moment about the Board of Ed budget request. After their budget deliberations, the Board of Ed requested an operating budget of $88,367,110. That's a 7.5% increase over the fiscal year 23-24. Regretfully, due to the challenges we just discussed, I'm not able to recommend the full 7.5% increase at this time. My proposed operating budget for the Board of Ed is $81,491,604, which is a 4% increase over the current fiscal year. So it went from a 7.5% increase to a 4% increase for the town council's consideration. The change is in careful consideration of the many factors that were put into play this year and the need to make the reduction to bring that proposed mill rate down from that 9.7. Fully understand that the Board of Ed is facing many challenges related to their budget. I don't want to speak for Dr. Brummett, but at her presentation she made to the town council and the board in February, she noticed that some of the challenges mentioned were contractual and salary increases, unfunded mandates, and grant funding is being discontinued. Dr. Brummett will provide more detail at the March 26th budget meeting. We understand that this is not a situation to take lightly. We are committed to working together to find equitable solutions for the schools, the students, the staff, and the taxpayers. Next slide, please. As with the town side, here are the past 6 years of the Board of Education's operating budget requests, what the town manager proposed and what the town council adopted. It should be noted that the town council sets the total appropriation for the Board of Ed operating budget, but it does not set the individual line item amounts in the board's budget. Those are set by the superintendent and board. So this year, again, the Board of Ed's budget request was 7.5. The town manager's proposed is 4% increase. In previous years, last year, the Board of Ed requested 5.95%. The town manager proposed 3.5%, and the council adopted 4.5%. You could see in past years, there were lower increases, including a 0% increase in fiscal year 21-22, which is during COVID, and some other increases that ranged from 2 to 3%. Next slide, please. So now we're going to get into the capital improvement side of the budget. Capital improvement projects include major construction projects, alterations or renovations to existing facilities, new equipment, and other expenditures that have a long useful life. Items or projects qualifying to be included in the capital project category have a life expectancy of at least 7 years and cost at least $25,000. The CIP plan presented to you for this budget cycle, fiscal years 24-25 through 2028-29. It includes proposed expenditures representing the long-range capital needs of the town and the board. The CIP budget request for the upcoming fiscal year 2024-25 is for the upcoming fiscal year 2024-25 with plans in place for the remaining years, although it should be noted that the 5-year plan is reevaluated and reapproved each fiscal year. If you're interested in learning more about the town's capital improvement and the board's capital improvement budget request, that will be discussed on Saturday, March 23rd at 9 a.m. here in the council chambers. Next slide, please. Take a look back at the past few years of the CIP allocations for the pay-as-you-go projects. Those are the ones that are budgeted and paid for as opposed to bonded or borrowed for. These can vary quite a bit year by year based on the 5-year plan, but also the town's current needs in terms of infrastructure, construction, or renovations and updates. As we saw on one of the first slides, there is a large 27.1% increase in the proposed pay-as-you-go CIP request. Last year, the town manager's CIP request was around 9.3 million, but the council adopted amount was a little bit less than that. It was 6.1 million. During last year's budget process, there was some ARPA funding available, which is the American Rescue Plan Act. It's COVID relief funding for municipalities. And the adopted amount reflects about $2 million that were able to be funded by those ARPA funds. The remaining reductions were made during the council's normal deliberations to come up to that total of $6.1 million, which was a decrease over the previous year. We just have, next slide, please, I'm sorry. Here's a list of the proposed CIP pay-as-you-go projects for the upcoming fiscal year. This first slide is the town side. We have a comprehensive revision of town zoning regulations, patrol car dashboard cameras, fire training tower improvement, respiratory protection for first responders, pavement maintenance improvement, sidewalk pavers, curbs repair, all those maintenance items, all those infrastructure items, or renovations, upgrades, improvements to the town infrastructure will all be listed in here. Next slide, please. On the board side, the requests include a district-wide HVAC replacement program, the annual contribution to the school bus replacement program, and the annual required appropriation to the public school CIP. The town share of the CIP is about $7 million, $7,044,802, and the board share is about $1.2 million for a total CIP request of $82.67. As mentioned earlier, the original CIP request was greatly reduced. Some of the pay-as-you-go items that I did not include in the proposed budget or included at a reduced number this time around include the removal of the Parks and Rec pool house renovations, the removal of an emergency management passenger vehicle, some stone wall repair, pavement markings, and the bus garage paving. Some of the reduced items include reduction to matching grant fund to trend, some reductions in the IT technology fund, the facilities improvement fund, engineering paver and sidewalk repair, and engineering draining and improvements. In the case of the reductions, it is often done based on what they anticipate their workload to be and what they currently have in their balance for the year. So we were able to reduce those items, but aren't reducing the service per se. Next slide. So due to all of these factors, the town and Board of Ed operations, the CIP, the debt service, MDC, the employee leave liability fund expenses, the proposed appropriations are estimated to increase 4.0% over last year. And you can see the previous proposals over the past couple of years. Next slide, please. Now we'll take a look at the revenue side. We looked at the appropriations and some of the factors that contribute to these expenses. Now we can look at the funds that support the revenue side of the budget. The appropriations are offset by about $140 million in estimated revenues. And there's some good news on the revenue side. Click, please. The first source of taxes are from prorated property real estate and prior year taxes, which and interest and liens, which are about $1.88 million. Click, please. The next revenue source is state aid, made up of mostly pilots payments in lieu of taxes and state grants. This totals about $25.1 million, an increase this year. There's also an increase from the education cost sharing grant and pilot funding. Next, please. The town expects to raise $2.8 million from locally generated revenues, such as interest earnings, charges for services, licenses, and permit fees. In addition to the revenues, this budget applies about $2.8 million from the general fund balance, which is about $860,000 less than what was used last year. Please. And the largest portion of revenue comes, of course, from the motor vehicle and property tax levy, which this year is proposed to be about $111 million. Next slide, please. There's a little bit of good news on the revenue side. The net adjusted grand list is expected to increase by about 1.1% this year. And there's an expected increase in revenues from non-tax sources such as the education cost sharing grant. Next slide, please. We do receive some municipal aid, and some of the major items of municipal aid that we receive include adult education, which is estimated about $57,000. The education cost sharing grant, which I just mentioned, is going to be about $16 million estimated, which is about $1.4 million increase from last year. The Mashantucket Pequot Fund for $164,000. The pilot funding, which is slightly decreased from last year, but still about $3.8 million. Motor vehicle property tax grant for $2.1 million. Other grants for municipal projects, about $1.7 million. And the new cannabis tax is about $300,000. Next slide, please. So we need to put all this information, I skipped. Sorry about that. With the appropriation side, I wanted to take a look at the historic mill rates to the town before we put it all together in our last couple slides here. As I mentioned, the town manager's proposed budget includes an increase of 3.9% proposed to the mill rate, which is a proposed mill rate of 39.84 mills. Last year, the town manager proposed a 3.5% increase of 39.85 mills, and the council adopted 38.36 mills, which was a decrease of about a third of a percent, 0.3%. The years prior to that also included some decreases. They were for various reasons, including that they were COVID years and the budgets were a little bit different those years. In 2020, 2021, the decrease in the mill rate was 0.8%, and the town council adopted mill rate increase was 0.44% decrease. The year prior to COVID was the last year we had before everything changed. The town manager proposed a 3.02% increase, and the town council adopted a 2.47% increase. You can see how things have fluctuated over the years. Next slide, please. So all of this information that I just very briefly described to you comes together to create the proposed budget. And it's a little bit hard to see on the screen because there's a lot of info on there, but this is page 1 of the budget. This summarizes everything that goes into the budget calculations and requests. It's available online and in any budget book that, the summary and the full town manager's proposed budget. So basically it just reviews everything we discussed. The proposed town government operation increase, the Board of Education operations, the MDC, the town's debt service and CIP, the Employee Leave Liability Reserve Fund. And then that takes that total and it deducts the estimated revenues from non-tax sources and revenues from the motor vehicle taxes. It then further reduces it by the general fund balance applied and the grand list.
I'm in.
And all of those numbers come together to calculate the proposed mill rate of 39.84, which is a 1.48 increase, which again goes back to that 3.9% number that we've been discussing. So what does this proposed budget mean for the average taxpayer? If this were to pass without any changes, then the average taxpayer would see a change of $283 to your annual tax bill. And to get to that point, we figured that the average home right now this year is assessed at $191,253. So you take that calculation of the mill rate, and again, it goes back to that $283 expected over last year. The taxpayer who owns a home with that average assessment can expect, again, that $283 increase, which is that 3.9% increase in taxes over last year. Of course, the actual amount of the tax increase for a homeowner may vary depending on your home's assessment. So if it's significantly higher or lower than what's listed here, then your results will vary. Since motor vehicles mill rate was capped by the state last year at 32.46 mills, there would be no increase in taxes based on the car for the vehicle assessments. Next slide, please. I'd like to thank really express my gratitude to the Town Finance Director, Janet Murphy, the Deputy Director, Lisa Rydecki, our Executive Assistant, Heather Shanti, our Administrative Aide, Karen Galicio, and Dr. Brummett for their expertise and efforts throughout this process. This concludes the informational portion of tonight's public hearing. Now the taxpayers and electors will have the opportunity to speak on the budget. However, this format for this public hearing doesn't allow for back and forth between the people speaking and the council or myself. So if you have any questions that haven't been answered during this public hearing or anything comes up in the coming weeks, please feel free to contact the town manager's office by either giving us a call at 860-665, we lost our screen, 8510, or email us at townmanager@newingtonct.gov. Thank you for your time.
Procedure. I think we just open it up and double check with Susan.
Open the floor up now.
Just open it up.
Floor is now open for anyone who would like to come up and speak in public participation. We ask that you state your name and address for the record and 3 minutes to speak.
And we'll take turns.
Yeah, and we'll take turns between those online and who's in the room.
Jen Rodriguez, 71 Northwood Road, Newington. Good evening, Mayor and members of the Town Council. I'm a parent of a school-age student and an educator of 16 years in Newington Public School System. I've seen many budget cycles come and go as a voter of 24 plus years. I think we look at the budget and think, hey, no big deal. They've lived with little before, but at what expense? The ripple effects of the pandemic will be felt for the next 10 years. Our youngest students significantly impacted by the pandemic won't graduate for nearly a decade. The federal government and state government understood that and funded us to provide support services for academic and emotional needs. That COVID funding has ended, but the need has not ended. In my 16 years, I've never seen the level of need that we see now. Our special education budget has increased exponentially. We're now seeing students who are highly dysregulated and need a tremendous amount of emotional and safety support. We're now seeing students who require intense math, reading, and writing intervention. The past several years have left our education system in a precarious position. We have teachers leaving the profession in droves. Burnout is real as educators are being asked to shoulder more and more as a result of these lean budget cycles. Our classrooms have become spaces of political infighting, and tonight we stand having to fight for proper funding to support our students. Study after study show that positive student outcomes are directly related to funding. Study after study show that properly funded schools increase property values. I stood up for you all this past year. I publicly endorse the majority sitting before us today as a Newington Teacher of the Year and a longstanding resident. I'm asking you to stand up for us and for our students and for our community. You are the change our community asked for. Responsibly fund the Board of Education budget proposed to you so that we can provide the level of support and learning our students need. I know this is an easy decision and a lot of deliberation and compromise needs to be made in this process, and I appreciate that effort that you're doing with Dr. Brummett. So thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Nobody online. So anyone like to come up in the room? Only one at a time, sir.
The door.
Hello.
The babies in the room will keep us behaved.
So Greg Ostrinsky, 267 Audubon Avenue. I'm a relatively new resident of Newington, a couple of years, and I've got an even newer resident here. Just wanted to say that I am very much in favor of increases to the education budget. You can't really build a school district overnight. And so I'm hoping that by increasing the education budget, increasing the teachers' salaries, things like that, we'll be able to keep talent that we already have in town and attract further talent to, so this guy can have a better education. Yeah. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Been true because of that.
Still nobody online? Floor is open. Anyone?
Good evening. My name is Barbara Gabriel. I live at 115 Summit Street in Newington. I am proud to say that I have attended Anna Reynolds, Martin Kellogg, and Newington High School. From there, I went to college, became a teacher, moved across the state a few times, taught in different types of school districts, got married, had kids, and finally bought a house in Newington in 2022. When you buy a house, you are not simply purchasing property. You are investing in an entire community. You are investing in people, programs, and services, whether you directly benefit from them or not, with the goal of creating a stronger community. The reputation of the schools was a driving force in our house buying process. Every day, we are amazed at the care and compassion shown by teachers and staff at Anna Reynolds and the quality of education our daughter is receiving. From talking to other families, we know this is the standard, not the exception. While everyone would love to turn the page and move beyond the COVID years, the reality is that teaching today is very different than it was 50 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 4 years ago. Our current elementary students were home in quarantine during critical periods of development, and we will continue to see the social, emotional, fine motor, academic, emotional, behavioral impacts of this for many years in school. The needs of these students are continuing to grow. Reducing staff, programs, and services puts an additional strain on staff and students and really only creates a bigger problem. We want to continue to be proud of education in this town. I encourage you to support the Board of Education budget as they have proposed. It is an investment in our students, our community, and our future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nobody on Zoom? Floor is open.
Hello, Amanda Miano, 67 High Ridge Drive. I'm a parent of a middle school, elementary school, and I have a child who will be going to new schools next year or the year or two. Prior to having my children, my husband and I searched and purchased a home in Newington due to the great schools and central location between where we grew up. I am here today to ask the town council to consider a full budget that was presented. A 4% cut in the budget that was proposed to town council raises concern for potentially larger classes. This is already a future concern due to all of the apartments being built throughout the town. I know personally firsthand how this impacts students in their learning. My second grader had major issues last year due to classroom dynamics to the point where we had to seek outside help from a doctor. These issues impacted not only her learning, but other students in her classroom. I can only imagine if her class size was bigger, how much worse it would have been for her classmates, teachers, and staff. My next concern, if the budget is cut, that necessary programs will be cut as well. It is my understanding that there are already interventionist positions the board had to cut due to the ESSER grant money going away. Now seeing this huge cut that was proposed to the board budget and the town's budget will have an impact on even more positions that are needed and prove to be helpful to students. If it wasn't for the intervention my child receives, she would be in a bad place, not only academically, but mentally. It is my worry that spreading support too thin or eliminating it altogether will prevent students, mine and others, from getting the support they need. Please consider adding back the full budget passed by the Board of Ed into the town's budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Still nobody on Zoom?
Hello, my name is Julia Dennis. I actually live in a different town, but I had heard that you were interested in hearing from stakeholders. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, I live at 115 Norton Road in Berlin. And I am a teacher of Newington Public Schools. I teach at the high school. And I just, I know you're in a challenging position. I understand how the town budget process works and how you have a really challenging decision to make. So that's why I just wanted to come out and share so you could hear from someone working with the students. And thank you for welcoming the public comment. And, In 2019, if you had told me within the next 5 years, there would be significant change in the way students learn and the challenges both students and teachers face in the classroom, I would not believe you and I'd say, bring it on. But it's a lot different than what I would ever expected, and I would not believe that this is the reality we're living in. Teachers are working really hard to provide the best possible instruction to support all our learners and based on the unique challenges they are presenting. With a reduction in funding, that's going to make our jobs more difficult, and it will also deter us from supporting our students. The majority of the budget is people and programs, and with any reductions, those will be the most impact. Those will be the first to get cut, I'm assuming. And those cuts will increase class sizes, course offerings, eliminate programs that we rely on to support students. And we have a number of them, and we rely on them. And I'm sure we've all felt the impacts of inflation as the cost of living has increased and the consumer price index just increased today. The CPI inflation calculator, $1 in 2019 is equivalent in purchasing power of about $1.21 today, an increase of 21 cents over 5 years. The dollar had an average inflation rate of 3.82 per year between 2019 and today, producing a cumulative price increase of 20.64%. And we're all feeling it, and it makes decisions more challenging when looking at your overall municipal and school budget. But everything we do in the schools is for the children, and the children rely on us. And we need to make sure that we have a place that they can thrive in a post-pandemic educational environment. Finally, this past legislative session, there was legislation passed on funded mandates such as financial literacy, the Right to Read Act, science of reading, and this is all requiring more human capital and funding. And I've been vocal at the state level about the unfunded mandates and the impact it's having on our local communities and school funding. However, when a top-down approach from the state is taken, these mandates are put into place and they need to get funded. So overall, I just wanted you to hear from me that, important to consider that teachers are struggling, unfunded mandates are in place. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So nobody on Zoom?
Absolutely.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Erica Wetzel, and I live at 92 Old Musket Drive. I am here tonight as a parent, as a business owner, community member. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I am here to really support the full approval of the budget as it was presented to the town council. Everybody here has talked about the level of impact that our students are going to feel. And I just ask that you deeply take that into consideration with interventionist programs, support from, I volunteer, I was a PTO president for many years and newly retired this year. But I'm in the schools weekly, volunteering for different events. And I encourage you to spend a day there, spend an afternoon, see what's going on in the schools, see how the programs are being run, the impact that we are feeling as a result of different cuts that are happening around the community. It's important to remember that post-pandemic, as many people have mentioned, that we are feeling these financial crunches due to these cuts in the state and federal funding funding. We are aware that there are many positions that have been recently cut and programs that will be affected by the loss of the ESSER grants. And it is really important to remember that we here in Newington, we are renowned for our school system and the diverse community. And I really feel that living here as a member, as a business owner. And it is so important to make our tax dollars goes towards solidifying and protecting the services that we do offer to our residents. We take a lot of pride in that. As our town grows, it's important to remember that these services to continue to have them in place and so that they continue to flourish. So tonight, I ask that we stand together here as parents, educators, counselors, paraprofessionals, administrators, volunteers, and countless others that make this school system and our town one of the best in the state. And I urgently ask for you to fully back the budget passed by the Board of Education in the town's budget. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
We do have one on Zoom. Is ending in 070. I believe that's Ms. Lyons. Go right ahead.
Hi, Rose Lyons, 46 Alton Drive. As a resident who was given a failing grade of F by former Mayor Rodney Mortensen, I have been following the budget for the last 10 or 15 years or so. He didn't feel as though residents became involved in the budget as they should have, and they have a lot to say after the fact, but not while it's in the process. I'm glad that people are coming out tonight in support of the Board of Education budget. As a 1963 graduate of Newington High, and my daughter being a 1999 or 98 graduate of Newington High, I fully support what the Board of Education is requesting if they are truly needs of the system and not just wants in some other areas. So I please ask you to look at it very carefully and differentiate between the wants and the needs. I also like to, I know there's no back and forth, but I'd like to just mention that I recall a few years back when there was big controversy over the school board budget, and I anticipate that may happen tonight or today, and also in the future, that I think according to the charter, or there's some stipulation that people only that are residents of the town of Newington over the age of 18 and either taxpayers or voters or whatever can speak to the budget. I appreciate that the woman came earlier from Berlin and spoke, but if someone could check that out so that doesn't turn into a fiasco like we had quite a few years back. We were at the high school and the police were there and everything else. So if we could just check into whatever the restrictions are as to who can speak at these meetings, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Lyons. Nobody else on Zoom? Anybody else in the room wishing to speak? Seeing none? Should we adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn to the public hearing, close up the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Mankey, seconded by Deputy Mayor Rada. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight and speaking. Really, really appreciate hearing from you all and hearing the feedback. It's a process that we're at the beginning of, and we're happy to hear from all of you. It's really great to see so many folks here tonight. With that, I will entertain a motion to conclude the public hearing.
Yeah, I think we did that. We're all.
Oh, we're done. All right. Then we're done.
We're done.
How we doing?
Thank you very much to everyone who came out.
We have a 1 minute break.
Yeah.
Good to see you. We leave this.
Are we starting right now?
No, I think we're taking a minute.
Can we?
Are we taking a minute?
Before we jump in. I got your back.
We're not done?
Right?
Let's get out of this one.
Green, can we?
Bathroom bio break.